Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Mayhem ensues in Kansas City as a mother of two was killed and many others were injured during the Chiefs Super Bowl parade. Calgary Tory MP Michelle Rempel-Garner referred to Federal Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault as Crazy Town. We will explain why. And this is National Flag of Canada Day. We hear from a veteran at the Lethbridge Legion about why the Canadian flag means so much.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Law enforcement surged to the area of a shooting at the end of the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl parade as terrified fans ran for cover on Wednesday. At least one person died, a mother of two, and more than 20 others were injured. Police say it was a personal dispute between several people that got out of hand when gunfire erupted. Nearly 1 million people went to downtown Kansas City on Wednesday afternoon to join in the celebration as the Chiefs football team won their second consecutive Super Bowl. One witness says at first she thought that somebody may be playing a joke until she saw the SWAT team make an appearance.
Well, the only thing I really saw was it become chaotic. And I hear down, 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 everybody down. And I'm like, somebody's joking. You know, this is what I'm thinking. And about the same time, all of a sudden, I see the SWAT teams jumping over the fence. And I'm like, okay, this might be real.
Police in Kansas City say they detained 3 people, including 2 youths, and recovered several firearms. No one has been arrested, however, in connection with the shooting. More than 800 police officers were providing security for the event. Canadian manufacturers of masks and other equipment supplied during the COVID-19 pandemic are not happy. They say the Trudeau government misled them about purchasing and helping to sell their products. Those companies are now seeking more than $5 billion in damages from Ottawa. They allege Canada's negligent misrepresentations resulted in about $88 million in investment losses and a further $5.4 billion in projected lost market opportunities over a 10-year period. The federal government will have an opportunity to file a defense to the unproven allegations as the court case proceeds. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre outlined his party's plan on affordable housing in Pointe-Claire, Quebec on Thursday. Poilievre says Canadians are finding it difficult making mortgage payments. He says many are now amortizing their mortgages for much longer than just 25 or 30 years.
There are now mortgages that are amortized over 90 to 120 years. That means 3 generations of a family would be required to pay off one mortgage. That would have been unthinkable before Justin Trudeau. My common sense plan is to require that these deals incentivize less bureaucracy and more home building. The deal should require municipalities permit 15% more home building per year. If they beat the target, they should get a bonus. If they miss the target, they should get a penalty. Small municipalities should be exempt from the penalties but eligible for the bonuses.
Calgary Conservative MP Michelle Rempel-Garner took to social media to blast Federal Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault. Guilbeault says he wants the federal government to stop investing in new road infrastructure and is encouraging more Canadians to walk and not drive to their destinations. Garner wrote on X, formerly known as Twitter, quote, "Every time I think he's reached peak crazy town, he corrects me." Now, Guilbeault later clarified his remarks, saying that he meant to say Ottawa will not put up the cash for large road projects.
What I said is, and I specified that I should have been more specific in that conference that I gave last week in Montreal. I was referring specifically to projects like the Troisième Lien, but in that same conference, I specified that we still have funds, obviously, to maintain and enhance our road network across the country. But I was talking specifically about projects like the Troisième Lien that the CAQ government in Quebec wants to move forward with, which is something myself and many of my Quebec cabinet colleagues have said time and time again, this is not a new policy at all.
Guilbeault also said his government wants to move more people out of their cars and into public transportation, which the government has spent billions to build. Critics argue that may work for larger cities, but not so much for rural regions, however. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew signed a new healthcare agreement today worth $633 million. Around $434 million will support the province's 3-year plan on improving health care, while $199 million will bolster senior care. Canoe's NDP government was elected last fall on a promise to improve health care and hire more doctors and nurses.
I have to say I am really, really happy about this announcement. I'm happy because healthcare is our government's top priority. And to have the federal government commit that we are going to walk on this path to ensure that there's more doctors and more nurses for you is good news for the province of Manitoba. Having more nurses, more allied health professionals, more physicians in the province means that we're going to be able to reduce wait times.
Now, the two governments last year agreed on a plan that would see $1.22 billion flow to the province over the next decade for shared healthcare priorities. There would also be a $72 million immediate one-time top-up to address urgent issues, including surgical backlogs. Schools were closed for a second straight day in St. John's as parts of the Newfoundland and Labrador capital dig out from around 40 centimeters of heavy snow. Close to 50 centimeters fell at the airport in Gander, and winds in the Bonavista area have been clocked at around 115 kilometers an hour. Environment Canada says Gander could receive up to 75 centimeters of the white stuff by Friday. The same low-pressure system is still unloading on parts of Nova Scotia, with schools closed across Cape Breton. Well, here in southwestern Alberta, we had a few light flurries earlier today with cooler temperatures. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, it appears as though the mercury may be climbing a little as we make our way to the weekend.
Yes, let's get out of these minus temperatures, shall we? Because that's exactly what's about to happen this weekend and beyond. However, this evening still looking like winter. We're still looking at very bitterly cold temperatures overnight, overnight low of minus 23. Now with that wind chill value, we're looking at minus 31. That means risk of frostbite. And then also looking at a 30% chance of flurries this evening as well. So definitely still looking like winter. As we get into tomorrow, Friday, looking at a high during the daytime of minus 8. However, in the morning, still going to feel that minus 30 wind chill and lots of sunshine, though. It's not until we get into the weekend and beyond that we're going to see some really lovely temperatures. And I'll be back later in the show to give you all those details.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The state-run news agency in Lebanon says the civilian death toll from 2 recent Israeli strikes has now risen to 10. The cross-border exchanges between Hezbollah and the Israel Defense Forces has continued for more than 4 months.
أي متحدة أي دولة أي مين بده يراد من هو اللي سألان ما حدا سألان عن شيء مناض بتحكي متحدة هي إسرائيل كل شيء هي الآمرة بالله بس الحمد لله الله يقوي المقاومة.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump revisited his recent comments about NATO as he left a Manhattan courtroom on Thursday. A judge has decided Trump's hush money trial will go ahead beginning on March the 25th. Trump says when it comes to NATO, other countries need to pony up the dough.
NATO countries have to pay up. They have to pay their bills. The United States is in for $200 billion, and they're in for $25 billion. The economy, as you know, their economy, when you add up the countries that make up NATO, it's about the same size as our economy. So we're in for $200 billion, they're in for $25 billion, and it's much more important to them because we have an ocean in between. It's a much different thing. So the NATO countries have to pay up. They're not paying up, they're not paying what they should, and they laugh at the stupidity of the United States of America, where we have a guy that gives $60 billion every time somebody comes and asks for it.
The City of New York, along with its schools and public hospital system, are suing tech giants including Meta, Google, TikTok, and Snapchat. Officials say they're blaming their addictive and dangerous social media platforms for fueling a mental health crisis in kids. Officials say that crisis has resulted in disrupted learning and has drained resources. The lawsuit says children and adolescents are especially susceptible to harm because their brains are not yet fully developed.
Over the past decade, we have seen just how addictive and overwhelming the online world can be, exposing children to content they are not ready for, disrupting the educational process, and seriously damaging their self-esteem and well-being. Our most recent data found that young people in New York City are experiencing anxiety, hopelessness, and even attempted suicide at rates we have never seen before.
The legal action is the latest in lawsuits filed by a number of states and school districts claiming that social media companies exploit children by designing features that keep them addicted to their platforms. Well, this is National Flag of Canada Day. At the stroke of noon on February the 15th, 1965, Canada's red and white maple leaf flag was raised for the very first time on Parliament Hill. Now later on the same day in 1996, National Flag of Canada Day was declared. Government officials say the Canadian flag is a symbol that unites Canadians and reflects common values we take pride in, which includes democracy, inclusion, and equity. A veteran at the Canadian Legion in Lethbridge also shared what the Canadian flag means to him during a flag-raising ceremony earlier on Thursday.
It's something that Canadians always think of July 1st as Canada Day, but often this day slips by. So we want to recognize that day. It's very important. The flag is a symbol of the Legion as well, and also very important to veterans. The flag upon which ultimately, if they pay the sacrifice, their coffin is draped in the national flag of Canada. And so that symbol represents on the world stage and in space our country just by looking at that maple leaf flag.
According to the federal government website, the Canadian flag is the only flag in the world with a maple leaf on it, and that red and white are the national colors of Canada. Premier Danielle Smith announced that our province has launched a new tourism strategy. She says it is important to beef up Alberta's visitor economy from $10 billion to $25 billion by the year 2035. Smith says that will occur through the implementation of more sustainable development, including all-season resorts,
which will give Alberta tourism operators even more of a competitive edge. And over the years, we've increased funding for Travel Alberta to support increased air access. In the last 3 years, Travel Alberta has expanded the number of airline seats into the province from key destinations across the United States, Europe, and Asia. With this increased funding, they will be able to continue generating and driving visitor demand to our incredible province. They'll also expand their efforts to develop and promote our province's amazing destinations with a focus on expanding tourism growth across communities in rural Alberta. From the Peace Country to the Badlands to the Southern Rockies, our province has so much to offer. The strategy also includes measures to continue growing Indigenous tourism opportunities across the province and make it easier for Indigenous operators to access capital for large-scale projects.
Alberta is set to welcome more than 200 of the world's best speed skaters to the ISU World Speed Skating Championships, which are taking place today through Sunday at Calgary's Olympic Oval. Officials say 20 countries will be represented during the tournament. The Oval will see 19 Canadians, including 5 Albertans, taking part. Officials say they anticipate more than 1,500 spectators over the 4-day event, which will give an economic boost of around $4.3 million to the Stampede City. Alberta's Tourism and Sport Minister, Joseph Scow, says this is the first World Speed Skating Championship to take place in Calgary since 1998. 36 law professors and other staff from 2 Alberta universities are calling on the province to reconsider policy changes affecting transgender youth. The open letter includes the University of Calgary and University of Alberta Law Schools. They say that the restrictions will harm the education, health care options, and sport and recreation opportunities of Two-Spirit, transgender, and gender-diverse children and youth. You know, many parents are actually celebrating the recent announcement from the province regarding gender identity and no more surgeries for minors. You can include Shell Landry in that group. She's a parent and part of Freedom Hub Lethbridge. Landry says the backlash we're hearing is real regarding the recent policy announcement, but at the end of the day, we need to protect our kids.
There is a lot of backlash, yes. A lot of the things we see online may include more of that backlash just because of censorship and the people who have the opinion or the parents and the community members who support this are being censored. And so their voices aren't being heard and they're looking like the minority, when in actuality, it is those who are pro-gender transition for minors that are the minority. And we cannot pander to the minority just to appease them when it's putting our children at risk.
Make sure you catch the full interview with concerned parent and Freedom Hub Lethbridge leader Shell Landry coming up later in our broadcast. Well, we had clouds and light flurries again across much of southwestern Alberta again today. Warmer temperatures, however, are on the horizon. A full look at the weather pictures coming up. We had more light flurries in Lethbridge again today, and it was fairly cool. Jeanette Roche is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, fortunately, a warming trend along with more sunshine are on their way as we head closer to the weekend.
Yes, but we are still looking at the slight possibility of some flurries overnight. As we get into Friday, though, we're seeing some nice clear skies, high of -8. Still seeing that high wind chill value, particularly Friday morning. But as we move past Friday, look at these temperatures. That's when we're going to jump up into those pluses, high of 2 degrees on Saturday. Nice clear skies for us. Down to 1 on Sunday with a mix of sun and cloud, up to 4 on Monday. And then look at that, 7 degrees on Tuesday and a high of 8 on Wednesday to round out that 7-day forecast. Loving that. That's more like springtime weather. Okay, average high for this time of year, 2 degrees, average low, -11. The record high on this day happened back in 1991, and it was a 14-degree day. And then look what happened in 1979. It was not a 14-degree day. It was -32. That was the record low for this day. 7:43, that's when the sun rose this morning. Sun set this evening at 5:49 p.m., getting so close to that 6 o'clock hour, looking at 10 hours and 8 minutes of daylight now, so beyond the 10-hour mark there. Okay, looking at clear skies on the west coast tomorrow, 7 degrees for a high in Victoria. Also looking at some 30 to 50K winds there, 20 to 40K winds in Vancouver with a high of 8 degrees. Clear skies across Alberta tomorrow, high of 1 in Edmonton, -3 for a high in Calgary. Also, both of those cities seeing some high wind chill values, particularly in the morning. Same thing for the rest of these prairie cities, -8 for a high in Saskatoon, partly cloudy skies there. Regina looking at a high of -9, but close to -30, looking at -31 with the wind chill value in the morning. And same thing for Winnipeg, close to -30 there with the wind chill, but -12 is the daytime high with clear skies. As we get to the central part of the country, seeing more snowfall. So 60% chance of flurries in Toronto, high of 0, -4 for a high in Ottawa, looking at a 40% chance of flurries, and a 30% chance of snowfall expected in Montreal tomorrow with a high of -1. As we get into Atlantic Canada now, -3 for a high in Fredericton, partly cloudy skies there. Halifax looking at a 30% chance of flurries, -3, -4 for a high in Charlottetown, and -1 tomorrow for the high in St. John's. St. John's, I should mention, also under a winter storm warning this evening, and that should be clearing up by the morning. Still expecting another 2 centimeters by the morning, and then those flurries should taper off by noon. So there you go. That's what's happening.
The Canada Pension Plan Investment Board says its fund earned a net return of 3.4% in its latest quarter and ended the third quarter of its 2024 financial year with $590.8 billion in net assets. That's up from $576.1 billion at the end of the previous quarter. The chief executive of CPP Investments says strong performance of global equity and fixed income markets during the final months of last year contributed to the fund's continued growth. The annual pace of Canadian housing starts in January fell 10% compared with the month before. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says housing starts came in at around 223,600 units for the first month of the year. That compares with roughly 249,000 for December of 2023. The annual rate in Toronto was up 179%, boosted by an increase in multi-start units. But Montreal fell 28% and Vancouver dropped 55% due to drops in multi-unit construction. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 333 points on the day to finish at 21,222. The Dow was up 348 points to 38,773. The S&P 500 was up 29 on the day to 5,029, and the Nasdaq was up 47 points to 15,906. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.47 to $78.11 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 2 cents to $1.59 US. Gold was up $12.06 to $2,004.40 US an ounce, and silver was up 55 cents to $22.92 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.22 per bushel, barley's at $6.07, canola's at $12.60, and corn is at $7.37 per bushel. Live cattle were up $1 to $183.40. Feeder cattle March contract was up 88 cents to $247.10, and lean hogs April contract was up 48 cents to $85. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.26 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Canadian manufacturers of masks and other equipment supplied during the COVID-19 pandemic are not very happy right now. They say the Trudeau government misled them about purchasing and helping to sell their products. Those companies are now seeking more than $5 billion in damages from the federal government. They allege Canada's negligent misrepresentations resulted in about $88 million in investment losses and a further $5.4 billion in projected lost market opportunities over the next decade. You know, there's been a lot of discussion lately surrounding 15-minute cities. Some people are very much for them, while others are very much against the concept. Coming up, we're going to chat with policy analyst Mark Joffe from the Cato Institute about this unique urban planning concept that has many Canadians talking. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of our local stories, check out our website, bridgecitynews.ca.
Edmonton has recently unveiled plans to incorporate the 15-minute city concept into its urban planning strategy. But could this potentially impact your freedom to move within or around your own city? Joining me today from the lovely Walnut Creek, California is Mark Joffe, a policy analyst from the Cato Institute. Thank you for being with us today, Mark.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
It's great to have you here to chat about something that seems to be alarming people a bit. Can you briefly explain the concept of 15-minute cities to those who might be unfamiliar with it?
Sure, and I actually live in a 15-minute city, so I can tell you it's not all bad. So the basic idea is that urban areas should be designed so that people can get to the things that they want to do, like education, shopping, restaurants, and so forth, with a 15-minute walk or bicycle ride from their home. And so, you know, that's pretty much something that a lot of people like. A lot of people also, I'm sure, you know, in parts of Canada, would rather be away from other amenities and living by themselves. But for many people who live in urban areas, it's attractive to be close to the things that you want to do. So I don't think the concept itself is necessarily bad.
Right. So could you give us maybe a few of the main advantages of the 15-minute city model?
Sure. First of all, it promotes personal health because you're walking or bicycling. Now, of course, with e-bikes and with e-scooters, you get a little bit less exercise. So that could be compromised depending on how that works. Theoretically, you know, the air is cleaner. There's less global warming going on because there are fewer cars driving around generating greenhouse gas emissions. So there are a lot of benefits. I think another one that advocates will quote is the idea that you're just closer to other people, and so you're going to have more interactions with your neighbors.
Right.
I think that one. From my own personal experience, you know, I see a lot of people on the street. It doesn't necessarily mean I interact with them, so I'm not really quite sure that really follows.
Right. It almost sounds to me like it's bringing back some components of small town living. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I mean, historically, going back to the Middle Ages, we lived in small villages, and it definitely was a 15-minute community. Maybe it was even a 5-minute community because there just wasn't that many things around. So yes, I think it does harken back to an earlier time.
Well, and I was also thinking of how towns used to have centers, maybe a park or a pavilion. Maybe my wife and I just watched too much Gilmore Girls, but that's kind of the idea of what I think of when you mention 15-minute cities. Luke's got to have a diner close to the center pavilion, but are there some disadvantages maybe with implementing 15-minute cities?
Well, I think it depends on how it's implemented. So, yeah, to the extent that we're relaxing zoning laws to require more mixed use type of development, some people are going to object to that, but I personally wouldn't. The problem becomes when it gets more coercive than that. So, the celebrated case happened in Oxford, England, last year, where they came up with the idea that the whole city was going to be divided up into a series of 15-minute communities, and to enforce that, they were going to limit the number of times you could drive from one part of Oxford to the other. And if you drove above a certain number of times, you would have to pay a fine. And so that begins to, get more big brothery, top down, control. And I think that really gets a lot of people worried. And I think that's a legitimate thing to worry about.
Yeah, people don't want to be fenced in, and fear is definitely a factor in a lot of people's lives. Sounds like this idea could have either the utopian plan or maybe dystopian. I wanted to ask you, relaxing zoning laws and having mixed-use buildings actually sounds like a good thing for urban environments. Could you talk a little bit about the advantages of that?
Sure. Well, let's start with the disadvantages, since I'm a bit of a pessimistic person. So let's start with the downside. Because actually, a lot of my neighbors in Northern California and throughout the state who generally agree with my kind of small government approach really, really, really hate the idea of the state of California telling local communities to drop their zoning laws. And there's a big celebration here, and I don't know if this is something that you see in Canada so much. There's a big celebration of the idea of the community of single-family homes, where everyone has a lawn, they have a place for their kids to play, and so forth. And that might not be a 15-minute community, because it may be that there's just so much residential that shopping is just more than a 15-minute walk or bicycle ride away. So, a lot of people like that type of lifestyle, and I don't want to necessarily denigrate it. I think that, in a market environment, we'll have we'll have choices. We'll have people who will be able to live in communities like that, and we'll have people like me who want to live in apartments and be able to walk to everything. So I think that as long as it's not coercive, and as long as there's a variety of options available, it all should be okay. Now, as far as the advantages are concerned, again, thinking about more of a dense urban area like San Francisco or New York, where I'm originally from, it used to be that there'd be a grocery store on the corner, a barber shop, other kinds of businesses. And then it started to become, with zoning coming in, starting, I think, more in the 1920s, that kind of mixed use was really denigrated. And the idea was we need to have like a sharp separation between where people live and where people do their business. And I think some of that was inspired by the fact that there are sometimes negative externalities, bad things that come out of businesses, like noises, smells, and that sort of thing. And I think a lot of that has gone away. So maybe in the old days you'd be butchering, animals live, and there'd be blood and odors and so forth. You don't really see that anymore. It's mostly packaged goods in a marketplace. So I think some of that might have had some legitimate foundation at the beginning. I don't think it really applies now. And I think there are other ways of protecting residents from externalities other than a really harsh regime of zoning. So yes, I think mixed use is a great thing, and I hope more cities embrace it.
Yeah, and definitely the smaller government and bureaucracy would be great too. I would like to ask you about across the pond, so to speak, and are there examples from Europe other than Oxford that have been implementing the 15-minute city concept?
Yes, Paris.
Yeah,
Paris. Yeah,
okay.
Paris has really been doubling down on it. During COVID, they put in a lot more bike lanes, which are fine. Although the disadvantage there is that often reduces the amount of available parking. I'm not close enough to the situation to know whether it's creating problems and that people just don't have a place to park. I mean, you can substitute curbside parking with multi-level parking structures. And I don't think it's too much to ask people to pay 1 or 2, euros or 2 or 3 Canadian dollars to park. But if you just eliminate parking and you don't replace it, and then people are driving around the block constantly, generating more greenhouse gas emissions, that's counterproductive. So bike lanes, can be a good thing as long as they're thoroughly utilized and as long as they don't reduce parking to below minimum acceptable level. Then on the downside, they've started to do car-free Sundays, which is something that we see in San Francisco a lot. I just think that creates a lot of unnecessary inconvenience. I mean, it's sort of nice. You get a nice picture of everybody walking along the River Seine or whatever. Where in San Francisco here, it's in the major park that we have. They close off a lot of the roads in the park. I think it makes everyone feel good. Well, it makes people on one side of the debate feel good, and I think it just creates a lot of inconvenience for others. And it's probably very bad for business because some people, may be 30 minutes away or 45 minutes away and would like to patronize businesses and now can't because they don't have that driving option on Sunday.
That's right. So have there been maybe some specific responses that you've heard from the Paris transformation over to 15-minute cities?
I have not seen a lot of criticism of it, but I haven't looked too carefully. So I'm sure there are people who don't like it. There seems to be a lot of populism in France right now, a lot of people objecting to various government edicts. I wouldn't be surprised if that was among them.
Right. Now, considering existing infrastructure and also, let's say, the habits of people who are used to vehicle transportation and other things like that, do you see this as being applicable the world over with a planning model like this?
Well, another case of a city trying this is Melbourne, Australia. So that shows another continent.
Yep.
They're doing 20-minute neighborhoods, so it's a little bit of a variant. Australia is a pretty low density country in general, so I don't know, how much of it can apply there. Well, and then you've got India and China, which are just incredibly dense countries. And you'd almost imagine that a lot of the people living there live in something like a 15-minute city already. A lot of people there don't have cars.
Yeah.
So they really have to be able to walk to everything.
That's right. Now, one of the issues that we have here in southern Alberta is the rural landscape and the bedroom communities that are around us. Do you think there's a provision or maybe planning with these 15-minute cities to impact that urban-rural connection, or maybe it's a divide?
I think the people who advocate 15-minute cities want to see us building up rather than building out. And so that actually is much more consistent with the idea of preserving the rural spaces. Others, and I would tend to put myself in this camp, would be for some development of rural areas if population pressure is what it is. Now, I mean, the last time I looked at Alberta's demographics, it wasn't like there was a huge increase in population going on. I don't know if that's changed. So I'm not really sure that there's really that much need to develop new areas.
Do you think that there's maybe a role that technology plays in developing, or let's say extrapolating out, this idea of the 15-minute city?
That's really a great question, because during COVID, I thought a lot about technology displacing our need to go into the office and do other in-person activities, and I think some of that didn't really pan out. One idea that I wrote about was the idea that we would all get these Meta branded virtual reality goggles or whatever
That's right.
devices. And we'd be having these Zoom style meetings, except we would have avatars and everything would be in 3D, and it would feel more like an office. And to my great surprise, because they invested an enormous amount of money in that, that did not catch on. That's really been a total failure. So it does seem that people want to physically be with people.
That's
So
right.
I don't know how much technology really does. I mean, although there's still definitely a lot of technology displacement going on. I mean, I'm talking to you from, my home.
That's right.
And a lot of shopping trips that I do now are obviated by simply going onto Amazon.
Absolutely.
Or some other online vendor, and the box shows up in my house a day or two later. So there are definitely technology reduces our need to drive places.
Right.
It's definitely the case.
Yeah. Now, one other thought that I had, the largest city near us is Calgary, Alberta, and one of the hot topics there has been expanding light rapid rail transit. And it seems to me that people realize that that is a hot button topic. They don't get large volumes of ridership. So perhaps 15-minute cities is actually a more cost-effective and workable solution for larger centers. Would you agree with that, or what would your take be?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts about that. First of all, some 15-minute city advocates import transit. So we talked about walking, biking, or scootering. Some of them will say walking, biking, scootering, or using transit. So, that is generally part of just more of an anti-car philosophy. What can you do to replace car trips? I've not looked at light rail in Canada. I've looked at a lot of light rail systems in the United States, and they have the same problem that you just mentioned, the lack of ridership. And at least in the U.S., I think this is less of a problem in Canada, but in the U.S., we have a huge problem with high costs. So, you could have systems going in at, $50 million, $100 million, $200 million a mile. And then, when it gets into heavy rail, we have a couple of systems, one in New York and one in San Francisco, or I should say, sorry, San Jose, that are looking at over $1 billion to $2 billion, this is US dollars, right, per mile. And at least in the case of San Jose system, the ridership is going to be very limited. So, it's not really a cost-effective use of taxpayer money to be building these systems. I know one thing that you've done in Canada that's been superior to what we have in most of the United States now, with one exception, is embracing driverless transit vehicles. So I know the Vancouver system, for example, is driverless. We have the first one now in the States, but it's in Hawaii where it's really not needed, but there's a driverless system there. If Calgary is thinking about that, at least it's going to reduce the operating cost of it.
Yeah. Well, hey, even the artificial intelligence wants to be in Hawaii. You got to hand it to those driverless buses or trains. Mark, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for joining us to chat about 15-minute cities.
Thanks for having me, Michael, anytime.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has been taking a lot of heat lately after announcing that her government will be making changes which will boost parental rights when it comes to transgender and personal pronoun issues for minors. Now, to chat about this in more detail is Shell Landry, who's a parent herself and one of the leaders of Freedom Hub Lethbridge. Shell, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
You bet. Now, first of all, why don't you explain to our viewers what Freedom Hub is all about?
So Freedom Hub is just a community group that I started in 2021. And so it's kind of a spot where people can come together, build community, and support each other in our rights. And it's really important to just know people in your community, right? So I kind of wanted to build that.
Now, Premier Danielle Smith was talking a bit about gender reassignment surgery and the fact that it'll be banned in Alberta for those 17 and under. Smith says since this is a life-altering decision with permanent consequences, that it's best left for adults to decide, not children, not minors. Critics are calling this a very cruel decision. What are your thoughts?
I think the critics are a little confused as to what it means to protect children. I absolutely love what Danielle has put forward, and I think that it is definitely time to see our politicians step up and help protect the children and parental rights and the children's rights, because this is about our parental rights to protect the children, right? So as a minor, they're not able to make certain decisions for themselves. They may think that they know what they want, but children change their mind as they grow and develop. And it is very important that we make sure that we're not putting them in harm's way just to appease public opinion, because that's how people get hurt. There's so many children who have had reassignment surgery or taken hormones and live to regret it. So it can be very dangerous to do this to children, and in encouraging gender transition in minors is very dangerous. So I absolutely love that our premier has stepped up to the plate and put forth action to protect children and parental rights.
There appears to be a lot of media attention focused on the LGBTQ2 plus community, their supporters, who call the Premier's decision deplorable, many within that community. There's also reaction outside of our borders here in Alberta and even outside of Canada. What feedback are you observing outside of the mainstream media?
I'm observing that in our community, people are happy with these policies. There is a lot of backlash, yes. A lot of things we see online may include more of that backlash just because of censorship, and the people who have the opinion, or the parents and the community members who support this, are being censored. And so their voices aren't being heard, and they're looking like the minority, when in actuality, it is those who are pro gender transition for minors that are the minority. And we cannot pander to the minority just to appease them when it's putting our children at risk.
Now, puberty blockers and hormone therapies would also not be allowed except for those who've already begun the process, Shell. Again, those opposed say this discriminates against the trans community, particularly the puberty blockers, which are very time sensitive. What are your thoughts on these kind of treatments?
Oh, well, my thoughts are that it's so dangerous to give children any kind of drugs or treatment that could cause long-term damage. And we've seen that, there's evidence of that. So it's very, very important that we keep a stand on this and educate those who are opposed, because they probably don't understand the implications of these hormone therapies. These drugs that they give to children are the same drugs that they would give to a pedophile to medically castrate them. It would make children infertile for the rest of their lives. So if they grow up and decide, well, I actually want kids, they won't be able to. And that's not a decision about having kids to make when you're a kid, because kids don't even have that on their purview. They aren't thinking about, I want to be a mom or a dad. And some kids do think about that, but it's not really until you're past that puberty stage, closer to maybe 18, 19, 20, or even 25, or some people wait till 30 before they're like, yeah, actually, I want to have kids. So it's important we don't take that option away. It's irreversible. And these hormone therapies cause extreme health damage. It shortens the lifespan of a person who has these treatments done, and it breaks down their bones. It's just really detrimental to the physical being of the person, especially minor children. You don't want to be messing around with those natural chemical hormones in the body by adding in extra things. And we do have research data on how these affect children, but we need more, and it's not a good idea to continue giving children these medications until, maybe there is more research coming out in 20 years or 30 years when we can see the effects that have happened on the children who have already undergone these things. But we don't want our children to be lab rats. It's really important to make sure we protect their health and their safety, and not just their physical well-being, but also their mental well-being. There is an increased rate of depression, suicide, and other long-term or life-ending effects of giving children these hormones. And it doesn't change how they feel. It just changes them physically. The mutilation is separate from the feeling, the psychology, the emotion. It's more important to give these children the help that they need, the support that they need, the counseling, making sure they know we're there for them and that we love them. And by no means is it discriminating to show a child that you love them and to protect them. And I think that discrimination has been thrown around so much in so many different arenas that a lot of people have started to forget what discrimination actually is. And protecting children is not discrimination. It's the opposite. It's protecting those transgender kids or the kids who may transition one day. It's protecting their right to learn and grow, know who they are, have a healthy body, have a healthy mind, have the support that they need. So when it is time, say when they turn 18, after they're 17, when their body's more developed, they have a little bit more of critical thinking experience and ability, and the support system that they've built throughout their teen years where they've been considering these things. It is a process. You can't just jump in, throw these kids under the knife, or give them a bottle of hormones and expect that there's going to be a great outcome for everyone. Because also you have to think about every body is different. So not everyone's going to respond to the hormone treatments the same. Some people might have different physical adverse reactions than others. And it's just so important to just allow them the time to grow and to become who they are without the medical interference.
Now, Shell, Alberta will require parental consent for students 15 and under who want to change their names or pronouns at school. Now, students 16 and 17 would not need consent, but their parents will still have to be notified. Now, the main concern from those opposed seems to be that this would cause trans students to be outed to their parents who may disagree with their choices. Now, some argue this could be very dangerous for students. What are your thoughts?
Well, they say it would be dangerous for students. So, from what I've heard, they're implying it would be dangerous for the students because of their families and their parents, which I feel is far from the truth. Don't get me wrong, there are probably some families and parents who would absolutely not accept their child's decisions or feelings and not be supportive. And that's when we need to make sure that there is help for them and a support system that we can build. But the majority of parents will not turn on their children and make things harder for them. As a mom, I know I will do whatever I can to make sure that my child's well-being is put first. I will make sure that I'm building a relationship with them and not just around this issue. I think that this isn't an issue of accusing every parent that they're going to be mean or hate their child or cause problems for them if they disagree with them. But I think we need to really support parents in teaching them how to communicate with their children, especially, the youth that may be going through these questions or trying to find their identity. So if we have support for parents and support for the family as a unit as well, so that they can understand each other, communicate, and create that support system.
So, Shell, what would you say to kids who've seen school as their only haven, where they feel that they can truly be themselves, where they actually feel safe, maybe safer than at home?
Well, I think that they should create a support system at school then, like we have systems in place in school, and I think they can always be improved upon. But creating a support system for that student through their friends, through their teachers or a counselor, or maybe some other adult volunteers. I don't know if that would, if they've got obviously checked to enter the school and to create a support system in the schools for these kids who feel they cannot go to their parents. But I think it is important that parents know if their child is claiming a different name or a pronoun at school that's different from their school records, it's important for the school to communicate with the parents about their children on all issues that may get that may grow into something bigger. So if it's something that can affect the child's health, well-being, their education, their social aspects around school and family, it's important the school is communicating with the parents so that they can create that support system for them. And if the school feels the parents may not be receptive or supportive to the student, um, then they can arrange to have some supports put in place. And I know that the schools do have great support systems. They do have a lot of connecting resources. I've used them with my daughter in school, and they're really happy and willing to communicate with you and work out plans. And the students need to also maybe be made more aware of that they do have support systems in school, if they feel like they can't talk to their family or the parents. Um, it's just so important that communication is kept open. And if parents are shut out of the conversation before it gets started, they don't have the option to support their child. That's taking away an opportunity for the child to feel love and support. And it's so important. Like, I can't stress how much I feel that's important. I have really strived to create a good relationship with my child, as I'm sure most other parents have. And the few parents that haven't, that may struggle with knowing how to talk to their kids about these things, there are community supports. And if they don't have access to them or aren't aware of them, maybe these community support services could be boosted in advertisement or promotion on the school newsletters, on the school website. Like, if you need help communicating or talking to your kids about these things or things that they're going through, it would be really beneficial to have that system where parents can actually know where to access that, and where students can know where to access that.
Now, in the classroom, schools will be required to notify parents when teachers will be teaching on gender identity, human sexuality, and sexual orientation. Parents will need to give consent, and they will have the option to maybe opt their kids out of that class. Some say this is creating some division. How do you see it?
Well, I don't think it's creating division, and I think that it's right in line with how things have always been when it comes to discussions about the sexual nature in school. Even way back when I was in school, we had Theme 5. Parents had to sign a permission form, to opt you in for that class. This is no different. It's just a little bit, I would say, expanded, because times have changed. There are different things happening for youth now some of the things are the same, but I mean, it's an increased amount of what's happening with youth right now in society. As time goes on, things will continue to change, but it is a really good system in place that has been a long time in a long time. And getting permission from parents for sexual content classes has always been a thing. And this policy is just reinforcing that. It's not adding anything new.
Now, Premier Smith also has an interesting proposal when it comes to sports and trans women competing against biological females in sports. This will not be allowed. Now, the province will look at allowing trans kids to compete in co-ed leagues. Critics say this will really paint trans youth as villains, but others say it'll really protect the integrity of female sports. How do you see it?
See, I think that's a great thing, and not just to protect the integrity of female sports, which is the focus on attacking that, the female sport, is what I've noticed is the target. I don't think that it's targeting women's sports to have co-ed sports available. I think that it's opening an opportunity so it can decrease discrimination, and it can create more opportunities for kids to be involved in any sport or activity that they would like to, where they may feel uncomfortable. Say, if they're a trans female, would they feel just as comfortable playing on the boys' team, you know, I think that would even open discrimination against them. You know, if there's boys on the team who are thinking like, oh, well, but you're actually a girl, you can't play on this team. I mean, you're actually, you know, you're a boy, but they kind of throw that around and twist it up where this person may feel attacked or unsafe. And we saw that a lot in the past with going through all the gay rights and things, you know. And I think that there has been a big fight in the past for rights, for gay rights. And I think it's great that we have those now. You know, as somebody who is LGTB, I think that it's great that we have the support and we have the same rights as everyone else. And it took a long time to get that recognized. And this movement to try to shame anybody who doesn't jump on board or fall in line with 100% with the beliefs of this transgender community. Well, not just the transgender community, but I would say more like the left community that is pushing this idea that there's this transgender attack, and there isn't. I think that it's just something that people are shining a spotlight on to create more problems. And Danielle Smith's proposal of these policies is the opposite. It is showing support for transgender children. It is showing support for the families. It's showing that we can find solutions to work together, and there doesn't need to be the division. There doesn't need to be discrimination against anyone. And we just need to support each other, you know? Love makes the world go round. If you really think about it, it's the only way to make success and to grow.
Shell Landry is one of the leaders of Freedom Hub Lethbridge and a concerned parent. Shell, thanks so much for joining us today from Lethbridge.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.